Hi, I'm Dan from Carbon Method, and our ceramic nano finishes work wonderfully on furniture, but they can also go on any wood product or item, such as this guitar here. I recently picked up a Martin GPC Special made entirely out of Ovancoal. This was a used guitar, so naturally it's got some surface scratches. The back and the sides are satin, and I'd like to add a little bit of gloss to that. So let's put our ceramic nano finish on this acoustic guitar. So far we've removed everything from the guitar, and now it's time to give it a nice clean. Now you can use isopropyl alcohol or any other type of solvent. I'm gonna use Carbon Cleanse. Now I'm gonna put gloves on, and the purpose of this cleansing process is to remove any oils or contaminants so that when we actually do go to do the coating, we get a nice firm bond. Now we wanna be pretty thorough when we're doing this. We wanna make sure we get all the skin oils off of the guitar, and there are probably a ton of them here. So I'm spraying onto the rag, and then I'm just gonna wipe down, starting with the body. I wasn't sure if I was going to coat the neck, but after taking the strings off and getting a really nice look, I absolutely am. Now we're gonna flip that over and get the back. So there we have it. We're all prepped, and now let's get prepared to coat this thing with our ceramic nano finish. Our ceramic nano finish is a two-part product. We have the base coat, which is called hard coat. It just adds a really hard layer of protection. And we have top coat. Top coat adds gloss and UV protection, and it's a moisture barrier, and it just does so many great things. It'll help keep skin oils off the instrument for the future, and it's where all the beauty and the protection comes from. So let's get started. I'm gonna start on the back of the guitar. So we have our hard coat. We want to make sure we shake it up. I want to start just with the grain. I'm just going to push this back and forth. Make sure we get nice even coverage till I can feel it, and it's definitely getting tacky now. So I'm gonna let that off, and we're just gonna let that set up for about 60 seconds. Okay, so that's been kind of sitting for 60 seconds. Now I'm gonna come in and level it. We're gonna draw at a 45-degree angle on the pad, and we're just gonna pull across that freshly coated surface to pull off any high spots that might be present. It's important to get a super clean, even layer when you're using our nano finish, and leveling helps us achieve that very goal. We're gonna give this just about, I don't know, 60 seconds to 90 seconds to just kind of set up, and then we're gonna buff that off. So now we're just gonna come in, and in small circular motions, we're just gonna buff out this hard coat layer. It'll feel grabby when you first go in there, but what you're looking for is it to kind of slicken up on you, and that tells you that you've gotten the material buffed out correctly, and that's feeling really nice now. So now we're gonna do this side. And I'm not gonna do the neck. I'm gonna do the neck all in one section. So I'm just gonna do the body for right now. So we take our hard coat. Now to get this joint where the neck meets the body, I'm just gonna use a card with a microfiber towel. I'm just gonna drop some hard coat on that towel. So I can come in here and add a nice, like, really defined edge. we're going to come back with our applicator block. I'm just going to follow the contours of the body, and I'm going to take this all the way down basically to the seam in the middle. So I kind of just spread it all the way out like that, and I'm just going to cross hatch this way, making sure to evenly distribute the ceramic layer. We're gonna let that set up for about 60 seconds and then we're gonna level it. All right, now we're gonna come back in, and as stated previously, we're just gonna draw on a 45 as close as we can get all the way down this body line. We wanna pull off any high spots where the material maybe is sitting unevenly. And now that that's set for about 60 to 90 seconds, we're just gonna come in and buff this off. So we come in from the edge here and just light, small circles, because we're working on a really confined area. We don't wanna make it too grandiose. So just nice, small circles. So I'm gonna let that flash for about, I don't know, 3 to 5 minutes before I flip the guitar over, just to give that coating a chance to grab moisture out of the air and start to set up before I turn it over. Okay, now that that's been sitting, let's flip this thing over and do the exact same process to the other side. And this swoop is going to be a little bit challenging. The cutaway is pretty aggressive on this guitar. All right, I'm gonna come back and cross hatch this. And I can feel it starting to tack up, so we're gonna have to move really quickly here, just to make sure we get even coverage all the way across. Nice. So now we're just gonna level this out. Now I'm gonna let this set up for about a minute, but I don't wanna wait too long because this whole section was kind of difficult to coat. So I kinda wanna buff it out when it's still setting up to make sure that I get another step of evenly applying and blending the Nanofinish out. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do that right now. So I'm just gonna do a really, really quick buff. And this is kind of a technique that can work in hard to coat areas where you just kind of do a really quick buff just to let it, so you get that extra step of blending to making sure you get even coverage, and then just kind of let it set for maybe 30 seconds. And then you can come back and do a thorough buff off of the Nanofinish. So now I'm going to come in and make sure I thoroughly buff off the hard coat. Now the first layer of hard coat is always an interesting one. Some wood finishes, some pieces accept the first layer of hard coat really well, and others you can see little blotches where maybe the finish is worn a little bit or it's more absorbent in that area. By the second coat of hard coat, you have a really, really nice smooth surface, and the second coat always goes down really nice. All right, so let's do the top. Now, I'm gonna talk about how I wanna handle this top just because we've got some obstacles here. So where the fretboard meets the body is a challenge area. Then we have the bridge, where the bridge meets the body is also a challenge area. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come in with this card. I'm gonna block out these tight edges first, just to make it a bit easier on myself. And then we'll come in with the pad and finish it up. So we're gonna shake that up. And really what I want to do is just make sure I'm getting the hard coat into these kind of hard to coat areas. Perfect. So then we can come in with the pad and finish it up. Now, there's not a square, so coating this is just kind of do what you will with it. It's not, there's not really a right or a wrong. You just want to make sure that you get really nice, even coverage and that it's well blended. So I'll kind of now cross hatch it this way, just to make sure that we're getting a nice, even layer of the coating. Now that that's setting up, I'm just gonna let that hang out for a minute, and then we're gonna level it and buff it out. So I'm gonna choose to level it this way. Now I can see, because this is a gloss top, I can see rainbows. And a rainbow would tell me that there's too much product, too much ceramic, Nanofinish on the top of the guitar. So that is why leveling is so important, because it will rainbow if the coating is too thick for a specific layer. And I'm not going to let this sit for too long, because I really do want to start to get the buffing towel on this, just to make sure that we get a nice even layer. All right, so we're gonna come in here and just buff this off. There, that looks great. So let's move on to this neck. So I'm just gonna throw some hard coat on the applicator. I'm just gonna spread that out. Now you could get really meticulous with this if you want, but what I'm gonna do is not let it set up for as long, so that I'm using that kind of blending it while it's still wet technique. So I'm gonna start down here. Make sure I didn't get any in there. Yeah. Just using my fingernail to get in all these little crevices here where the frets meet the neck or the fretboard. And you don't have to coat your frets, you don't have to coat your neck, you don't have to coat your headstock even. But this guitar has seen a lot of use, and so I'm just gonna give it a nice coating. It'll kind of bring the finish back to life and make it look new again. So I'm gonna let that chill for a second, and then I'm gonna come back in and buff it again. All right. Now as we flip it over, we're going to treat the back of the neck and the headstock as kind of one section. I'm going to start down here at the headstock. I'm just dragging it out. I'm going to get the top and the sides of the headstock and the neck. I get the back of the neck and the edge of the fretboard. All right, now we're just gonna blend this out. We're gonna level this as best as we can. It's a little hard to work on more curved surfaces. So I'm not going to let it sit very long. Then we're going to come in and buff it out. That is how you apply ceramic Nanofinish to a guitar. We're going to do 2 layers of hard coat. We've done one already. We're going to do 2 to 3 layers of top coat, and then this guitar will be fully protected for quite some time. So we've done 2 layers of hard coat, and now we're going to move on to top coat. We allowed an hour in between each layer of hard coat, and ideally we allowed 24 hours in between hard coat and top coat. So to get started, we're gonna throw on our gloves again, because we don't want the Nanofinish on our hands, and we also don't want fingerprints on the piece we're coating. This is top coat. This is the part that gives us the protection that we want. So hard coat gave us a really hard base layer, a layer between the finish of the wood and the top coat, what's going to act more like a wear layer, but this is going to give us all of the protection. It's going to give us UV resistance, water and moisture resistance, scratch resistance, and it's going to make the wood really, really pop. It changes the way that light interacts with the piece, so it works really, really well. So to get started, we're just going to shake that up. And we're going to take a fresh applicator pad. We don't want to reuse applicator pads between coatings. What happens is the Nanofinish starts curing in the pad and it gets hard, and we don't want to rub hard particles into a freshly coated or recently coated piece. We want to make sure we're using a fresh applicator pad. Just going to pour out some top coat onto the applicator pad, and then we're just going to come through and we're just going to get a really even distribution of this top coat. So I'm going to kind of just spread it around and make sure you go over it in different directions. And sometimes when you first put product on a pad, it doesn't actually get thoroughly saturated, and it doesn't feel like there's quite enough material down, so I'm just going to add a little bit more. And essentially what we're looking for is nice even coverage. We're going to keep spreading that around until it starts to tack up, and I'm feeling that now, so I'm going to pull that off. We're going to let this layer of top coat sit for about 60 seconds. Top coat does cure faster, so you need to be mindful of that. But now we're going to take our applicator on a 45-degree angle, and we are going to just draw that across the piece we just coated, which is the act of leveling. And so this is going to pull up any finish or any Nanofinish or ceramic coating that is maybe sitting proud. A high spot is going to look a lot like just a glossy layer. It'll be more glossy than the areas around it. So now that that's been kind of setting up for about 60 to 90 seconds, I'm going to come in with a buffing rag and we're just going to buff this first layer off. It's going to feel like there's a lot of friction. And then eventually it will start to smooth out. It's nice. So now that that's all buffed off, we're gonna turn this over and we're gonna do this side. So I've got a clean microfiber on my little white card here, just to get into these corners. And I just wanna make sure that I'm getting right on the edge of that joint there. I'm gonna come back, apply some more to this pad. And we're just going to come in here and spread this around. And then I'm just going to come back and cross hatch this whole section, just making sure that we have nice, even coverage. So top coat is definitely a thicker layer, and you're gonna kind of feel that, and you can see it when you're putting it on. The active particle load in top coat is multitudes higher than hard coat, and that there's a couple reasons for that, but with it being a thicker layer, it does appear on the piece more prevalently. So now that that's been setting up for about 60 seconds, we're gonna level this out. And I'm gonna do 2 leveling passes. Looks really nice. Then we're gonna let that set up for about 60 to 90 seconds before we buff it off. All right, so that's been sitting for about 60 to 90 seconds, probably about 90 seconds. And I'm just gonna come in and buff this off. I'm using a fresh side of this towel. We don't wanna reuse buffing towels for the same reason we don't reuse application pads, in that the Nanofinish will cure in the buffing towel, and then we're just gonna be scratching the freshly coated surface. So again, this is tacky right now on this first pass. And slowly it will start to loosen up and get fairly slick. So we're gonna let that set for a few minutes before I turn it over, just so that that layer has some time to kind of cure up before I flip it over and turn it on its other edge. But so far it's looking great. Okay, so that side has been sitting for a minute. It looks really nice. I'm gonna just flip this over and we're gonna get this other side. Just gonna bring this down. Spread it out nice and even. I'm gonna come through and cross hatch this whole section again. Going back and forth and spreading, making sure that we got nice even coverage of the coating. I'm gonna let that sit for about 60 seconds and then we'll level it and then we'll buff it out. So it's been sitting for about 60 seconds. Come back in and just draw the applicator across the piece at a 45-degree angle. And I'm gonna do this twice. Just because this is kind of difficult section to coat due to all the curves. Now after that's been sitting for some time, 60 seconds or so, 90 seconds, it's not really an exact science. You just don't want to let it cure too much, because then it gets really difficult to buff off if you can buff it off at all. So I'm just going to come in and buff this off. We're building really tiny layers here. And by doing that, we get really even coverage. And every layer we add, we're increasing the protection that we're looking for. We're also increasing the gloss that we're looking for in this particular instance. That's great. All right, I'm gonna flip this over and we're gonna work on the top. So the top has some interesting challenges. We have these joints here where the fretboard meets the body. Then there's all of these right angles in here by the bridge. Even around the pick guard, there's a little ledge that we have to pay attention to. So first thing I'm gonna do is come in with my card with a microfiber on it. And this allows me to just kind of get into those corners so that there's not gaps in the coating. I'm just going to come in and make sure that those edges are getting coated. Okay, then we're going to come back with the application block. We're going to spread and coat the top here. Because it's not square, just kind of, or rectangle even, just kind of do your best about spreading that coating evenly. Just going to keep spreading that out until it starts to feel a little too tacky, and I'm starting to feel that now. So I'm just going to quick finish up. Beautiful. Then we're going to let that sit for about 60 to 90 seconds so it can set up a little bit before we level it. Okay, it's been about 60 seconds. We're going to come back and we're going to just buff this out. Now, I wouldn't wait as long on the top of the guitar because it's already glossy. And so therefore, any high spots that exist are going to be really, really prevalent and easy to see. So you don't want to run the risk of letting that cure too long. Be easier to buff it out when it's relatively fresh. Sometimes it's easier to have a raking light that will shine across the surface. That makes it really easy to spot any high spots or glossy spots. So on the neck, I'm just kind of lay it on there, and because it's kind of hard to apply in this, I'm just going to kind of work it in almost as if I'm buffing while I'm applying it. It makes it a lot easier to get into all those little crevices of the frets that the frets make. And then I'm not going to let this sit too long, because what I'm going to do is use the buffing of this part almost like a way to spread it out to get even coverage. So I'm going to buff it while it's still kind of wet to make sure that I get all those small nooks and crannies. So there you go. The headstock and the fingerboard and frets are all coated now. And we're going to move on to the back. We're gonna flip this over. And now, come in with the applicator pad. We'll start at the headstock. Just get an even coat. I'm gonna make sure I get the edges of my frets up in here. I'm just gonna let that chill for a minute before we come in and buff it off. So it's been about 60 seconds. We're gonna go ahead and level this. Just gonna pull off any excess material. Make sure you get all the way around. So after we level it, we're gonna sit and wait for about 60 seconds and then we're gonna buff it off. So I'm gonna start with the headstock here. Make sure to get the front or the sides and the top. We're gonna wanna make sure we get the edges as well. And we're just gonna keep buffing until we feel that slick up for us. So we're just let that kind of hang out, set up for a few minutes before we turn it over. So we've got 2 layers of hard coat down. We've got 1 layer of top coat down, and we're gonna do another 1 or 2 layers of top coat. We'll put all the hardware back on and we'll take a look. So we gave the ceramic Nanofinish about 24 hours to cure, and now it's ready to be played. We did 2 layers of hard coat, we did 3 layers of top coat, and we took you through that application. And now this guitar just looks stunning. Take a look. And it still sounds amazing.